10 feet. Okay, goes down about 10 feet. And one of the things that it really helps is to increase soil health. It sequesters nitrates in the soil, certainly. And of course, this is something that especially in excessively drained and sandy soils is important. So to prevent those nitrates and so forth from migrating to wells, to rivers, and so forth. We've been studying and flying up here two fields that have been volunteered as production test sites. The University of Minnesota, of course, has its own plots at the St. Paul campus, but these are active fields, and this is the city of Cold Spring that you see down here. The two arrows indicate two of the fields that we have been flying for the past 3 years. The work that I'm going to present today is the field here in this red arrow, and it lies within, as you see here, the Cold Spring wellhead protection area. As the name indicates, these areas that have been designated in certain soils or soil associations that are excessively drained, and again, to protect, as we said, water quality, to protect and generate soil health. The field right here is where we see, and that's the arrow that's pointing here. This is a slide. It points to, well, this is a Kernza field. You see beans over here. And these are two water towers for Cold Spring, the Sauk River down here. And again, this is a new plant facility that's being built by a beer brewery up here in Cold Spring Brewery. So as you can see, it's important, especially when you consider the soils, as you'll see here in a moment. This is a bare earth, Google Earth image of that field. And you can see the various colors indicating different drainage conditions. And you get a better idea of this when you look at the perspective view, the bare earth image here, about a 2-power exaggeration. And again, note these undulations in the fields, and you kind of see the drainage characteristics and so forth. So this is the sort of the experimental plot, production plot in which Kernza has been growing, like I said, probably for about the last 3 years. This is a sign that was just put up. So this is a perennial grass. In other words, unlike wheat, which is an annual, which obviously needs to be planted every year, a seed planting of Kernza will be perennial. It will reproduce, not forever, but between 3 to 5 years. And of course, the main thing is it keeps a cover on the soil throughout the year. This is a ground view, and I think you begin to pick up the idea of how undulating this field is. Actually, it's covered, as is much of the area of the wellhead protection area, by Cold Spring. These are the soil boundaries that I have overlaid on top of it. The two series are the Chetek and the Arvilla, and they're both sandy loams with moderate to excessive drainage. And you can see here on this light toned area, you can see how really rocky the soil is on some of these higher areas in the field. Not so much as you, of course, get down into some of the lower lying areas, but they both are sandy loams. And again, water works through them relatively quickly, which is, of course, of concern, especially, again, in terms of soil health, water protection, pollution, and so forth. This is a orthomosaic that we flew. This was in May 12th in 2020. This is the beginning of the year, and you can see, again, not a lot of growth, certainly, and this is a good section. I used my Mavic drone, my Zoom 2, to do some video work and to take some photos and images, and you really do get an idea of where growth, at least at, before we get into maturity, is down in the lower lying areas, as seen here, and very little, of course, on these little knolls and so forth. I did get a 124,000 DEM from the Geospatial Gateway. This is the Cold Spring. And I clipped out the field out of that, and you can see it here. Note the, and I'm just showing you an idea here. This is a springtime image, mid-spring, and you can see again, those areas where there's relatively less growth than you see down in these other lower areas right here. So you do see that this field has a great deal of variability just in terms of the content. These are the culprits, if you will, that flew these missions. This is myself over here. This is Tom Oyne, again, head of our IT group here at St. Cloud State, and also sort of maintains our drones. This is Osaya Liu, a graduate student who also helped out this fall. This is the unit that we've been using over the last couple of years to fly these fields. It is a Matrice 210. The camera we're using is a Centera AG X710. It has, like it says, a multi-spectral configuration. So we are imaging in the blue, the green, the red, and the red edge, and also producing from that, again, NDVI images. This sort of shows you sort of a progression. We try to get in maybe 2 to 3 flights a year. You can see, of course, the springtime image here. You can kind of see the drainage as it comes through. A better idea, of course, what this looks like in this springtime image. So you can see how this, starting in May and really comes up starting in June and July. We try to harvest sometime in August, runs into September as well. These are just some representative slides that show that progression from June into August, and then the windroad as it's been cut and so forth in September. Just an idea again, we have about 200 and some odd images that we usually, this is part of our flight scheme. And this is just an example of an orthomosaic that's been made from those 200 plus prints. And you get some idea, again, these lighter toned areas certainly are where vegetation is somewhat lacking. We also, in addition to the orthomosaics, again, we're using Pix 4D. And you can see here again, the DSM, digital surface model. This has been draped over that LiDAR DEM. And also been able to take, and we manually have broken those into various classes. So again, you can see the variations in height of the surface, crop surface, and so forth here. And of course, for those of you who know something about it, of course, NDVI, of course, just a normalized vegetation indices. So these are the kind of products that can be produced. Now from that, these images, we can and also coordinate that with our digital elevation model to produce the primary derivatives, certainly slope. This is actually the slope as the 2.2 centimeter resolution. And of course, we resampled that to 3. So you can see where the slopes are, again, throughout the field, in the more level areas and so forth. We also produced imagery for aspect to get an idea, again, of course, how the crop does on slopes facing or oriented in different directions. And the third component that's usually part of these initial derivatives is a curvature. This happens to be simple plan curvature, sort of at a right angle to the slope. And you can see that as well in color. So you get, again, a pretty good idea. And we've also been able to produce in ArcGIS and, of course, in the Sega software, visualization and so forth, various other kinds of indices that have been created, again, from these initial products. This is surface ruggedness. Basically, this is how heterogeneous the surface is where the crop is being grown. And certainly you can see how in the center part of the field and down to the southeast, as opposed to some of the more level areas here, that surface. And this again has been now then the terrain ruggedness or heterogeneity in terms of slope has been overlaid on top of one of the orthomosaics. So once again, you can see the ruggedness, excuse me, and of course the crop and how those relate to one another. Also, we've had the ability to come up with certain, if you will, landform classification schemes. The typical landscape scheme, again, done in Sega. The numbers, of course, there's something that each individual researcher has to come up with, but again, the hilly areas and the more level areas become quite apparent here when using this particular tool. And in the same fashion, we also use what are called geomorphons and have calculated those. And again, this is a visualization, line of sight visualization technique. What's flat, what's a peak or ridge, as the classification goes. And you can see that now superimposed on top of the screen or the Google Earth. So once again, you get a good idea and represented nature of what this field looks like and where the crop is being grown. We've also done things in terms of drainage, in terms of generating information on topographic wetness. And again, the yellowish and brownish areas, as opposed to the more concentration, again, of what's wet, what's dry, or what's more excessively drained, is quite evident here. This is a June 16th image, and you can see how that sort of gets borne out. And again, this is the NDVI of that. So if you go back, again, at this particular time, you can see sort of a lack of coverage, but certainly as we move into flights that were done in September, you can see how a lot of that is filled in, and again, represented by the NDVI in terms of healthy growth. All right. Now, in addition, what the University of Minnesota people have done, they will come in, of course, and monitor the field. But at the end of the growing season, they will come in, and that's what these red dots, these are sites where samples are taken by students coming up from the Minnesota campus. And again, they're looking at the amount of grain and straw that we're seeing produced here. Registered, of course, in as we see here. There are in the field, if you take a look here, lysimeters. There are 3 of them to measure soil moisture content and to get an idea of how that works. Those 3 of the sites that were gathered, data is gathered in the field and samples are taken. The green ones are the lysimeter sites where information is gathered, and of course the others. And you can see how that's spread out over the field here. So this shows grain production throughout the field. This is simple IDW classification. The darker or the blue areas, of course, indicate lower production or crop yields. The other areas that you see here in the mauvish colors, yellowish colors, and so forth, are higher yield content. again, in terms of the straw production and the grain production. This is again overlaid on top, maybe somewhat more representative instead of looking at sort of some of these isolated clumps. This was using a splining routine on the grain production, again overlaid on top of that September image. And again, the lighter tones here indicate, you know, poorer growth as opposed to the lighter areas, the darker reds and so forth that are certainly more healthy, more productive, and so forth. And you get an idea of that. I think really, and again, once you can see that data that has been overlaid on top of this Google Earth image, I think one of the problems where some of this analysis is sort of broken down in terms of being able to correlate with the terrain characteristics of this particular field and the reflectiveness, the NDVI data and so forth that we've seen generated in these orthomosaics and so forth by our flights, is the fact that I think that what we're seeing here are the sample sites that probably need to be expanded. I don't necessarily think that this is as representative as it probably should be. And I think the next go around, as you can see that some of the gaps here where we did not sample on some of these higher areas in the field where production was much lower, given the rocky nature of the soil and so forth, as opposed to some of the other areas. I think once we rework that as we go into the flying season next year, obviously we're done this year, but I do think that using UAS and being able to have the kind of resolution, really sub-centimeter resolution that we get with our UAV flights, the ability to produce very fine detailed orthomosaics, and with that, with the Centera sensor system being able to generate NDVIs and so forth to monitor plant health. I think one of the things that we also need to be looking at with future studies is to better correlate the digital surface models with the actual DEM models to see again what plant height and how that varies in the field. We're working on that as well. I think one of the things that the University of Minnesota and our discussions with them would like to see is to be able to coordinate more with UAS imagery in trying to monitor the moisture content of the plant itself, which is a determinant as it might in terms of harvest dates. That's one of the things that is sort of hit or miss right now. And hopefully going into next year, we're going to be able to use our thermal sensor that we have on the matrice and begin to do more of those types of studies and better coordinate again with the moisture content of the lysimeter data and our plant data as well. That's all I have at this time. Jerry, if you want to open it to questions or anybody.
Thank you so much, Mr. Richason. If anybody has any questions, please be putting them into the question and answer the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we'll give it a moment to see what's coming in. But so far, I'm not seeing anything.
Do you want me to end the sharing of the right now?
Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah.
Let's
see. Oh, stop. Yeah, there we go.
I'm not seeing any questions coming in.
Okay. Well,
thank you so much. That was extremely fascinating for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been very interesting. And like I said, this certainly is an ongoing project. Just to take just a couple of minutes here, because this is such a new venture. It's also part of the Green Forever Green program down at the University of Minnesota, where I think in the Land Institute and the whole idea of generating more and more varieties of different kind of perennial crops, not just Kernza, but others as well, to really keep soil in place to, as its name would indicate, have some type of cover crop during the entire season of the year. So, yeah.
And one of the things that keeps recurring to me during this conference, whenever platforms like these are mentioned, that everything that we keep coming back to is that people view the drones, UASs, whatever you want to term them, as toys, but they are such valuable platforms for doing such a broad a range of work.
Precisely. Absolutely.
All right, we do have a couple questions come in now. First one is from Ben Ruley Stearns. Do you have an idea of the volume of data that you have collected and are storing for the effort so far?
Specifically, I think we try to have done in the last 2 years at least 3 to 4 flights a year from early spring to maybe middle of September or so. Yes, all of that is being kept here at St. Cloud State, on our cloud server and so forth. And yeah, I think anybody that would want to have access to that, please let us know. And we'd be more than happy to share what we have, some of the work that we're doing and with those that are interested. Yeah.
And an anonymous attendee has asked, will you look at examining different types of crops in the future? And for me to add on to that, what types would they be?
Well, actually, we've been also doing some monitoring for vineyards and so forth of an area here just south of Stearns County. One of the other things I think as well that we've been looking at is beans, soybeans, and some of the different kinds of diseases and so forth, fungus and that type of thing. So yes, I think we definitely want to continue with our work with Kernza, but there is also the interest in especially working with some of the folks with Stearns County Soil and Water and working with some local farmers to see what other things that we can do, not so much towards necessarily precision agriculture as productivity, health, and vigor of plants over larger areas. And again, correlated with soils, as we see in soil health. Yeah.
We have a message, not so much a question, from Heather Albrecht. Exciting use of innovation in regenerative farming. Thanks, Ben.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
all right.
I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and if you have anything else, Ben?
Other than anybody that would like further information, please feel free to contact us up here at St. Cloud State University. We'd be more than happy. I do have to say, you might want to address this to Tom Moyne or to myself. I am officially was retired up here at St. Cloud State, but there was a need for me to come back. So I went from emeriti professor to adjunct professor in a few weeks. So top of the heap to the bottom of the heap, I guess. I don't know. But
still working, still influencing though. That's the important part.
Hopefully, yes. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Ben.
Sure.
All right. Take it away, Randy.
Okay, you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk about starting a drone program. We started a drone program at Dakota County, and I'm just going to kind of go through the process that we went through. Sorry, my phone is buzzing. Okay. The beginning of research, really, we started looking at drones several years ago. The county sheriff's office had been using drones since sometime in 2017, but their operations were really limited to law enforcement. They were able to do some test flights, and training flights and things like that to help us gather some imagery, but they really were not allowed under their certifications to be able to perform services for other county departments. We also worked with Katie Gilmore, PAAP Drones. She was actually located in Apple Valley. We are in the Apple Valley, or the Dakota County Western Service Center in Apple Valley. So that was very convenient. I connected with Katie through some other forums, and we started doing some test imagery and getting some products from her. I worked with her to do some accuracy testing. There were some mutual benefits of that. Katie is incidentally now the MnDOT UAS program manager and continues to be a very good resource if you're interested in pursuing a drone program yourself. Some of the initial projects, we did contract for services for county road projects. We collected videos, developed an orthomosaic, a 3D point cloud, and the costs vary widely. If you just want images and videos, it's really pretty inexpensive to contract for those services. You don't need to create your own drone program for that. But the precision mapping can get quite expensive because then we get into a lot more images collected to create an orthomosaic and to create a 3D point cloud. And as well as doing the post-processing to make sure that you're able to get the accuracy that you want. So that's when the costs really start to go up. We did purchase Drone to Map. That is Esri's product that implements the Pix4D engine. We wanted to be able to potentially process the imagery ourselves, so we could just contract to have somebody collect the imagery, and then we would be able to do the post-processing to create the orthomosaic and the 3D point cloud and other products as well, 3D models and so on. And then we did continue with the accuracy testing. It was interesting to find that we were actually able to achieve something very comparable to the ASPRS accuracy standards for digital imagery. So getting 2 centimeter imagery with an RMSE of plus or minus 4 centimeters is very realistic. And so we continued with that kind of work, doing those initial products, as well as helping other county departments understand the potential of this drone imagery. So then with the costs that we found associated with those county road projects, somebody got the idea, let's buy a drone. We can save money. We'll just do it ourselves. And that's when we had to put the brakes on. There are a number of issues that come into play. It's not as simple as just go buy a drone. That is not the first thing that you should do. Do your research, understand what you're getting yourself into. And there are certainly costs associated with setting up your own drone program and time commitments that are associated with that as well. So there are rules. FAA controls the airspace. Anything that is flying in the air comes under the FAA's jurisdiction. That's federal government. And there are 2 different ways that you can get the appropriate certifications and authorizations from the FAA. It's important to note that if you are flying a drone for commercial purposes, which means there is any benefit beyond your own personal pleasure or a recreational use, you do need FAA certification. If you are doing something that has some kind of commercial benefit, whether you are getting paid for it or not, you still need the FAA certification. So it's important to know that. First is a certificate of waiver or authorization, or COA. This used to be the only option that was available, and it was pursued early on as drones came into the field by public safety. They were able to define exactly what they wanted to use drones for, and be able to describe that, and then get certification from the FAA to allow that. The COA is granted to an organization, and then the organization is responsible for complying with any specific FAA requirements and restrictions that are associated with drone operations. but it also defines specific activities. So in the case of law enforcement, that was why our sheriff's office was restricted in not being able to provide services to other county departments, because their COA was specifically associated with public safety operations. But the new way of getting a certification is called Part 107. This is granted to individual pilots through certified testing. And it then allows for more general operations of the drone within the organization. The general rules from the FAA, you must have an FAA certified pilot in command of all missions. It's important, certified pilot. It does say that you have to have a certified pilot in command. You don't actually have to be a certified pilot to fly, which is interesting. But the certified pilot needs to be in charge of the operation. So we can have a certified pilot in command of the mission, but have a videographer, for example, responsible for actually doing the capture. You must fly under 400 feet above ground level or within 400 feet of a structure. Must keep the UAS in sight by the remote pilot in command or visual observer, actually. Must fly at or below 100 miles per hour, must yield the right of way to manned aircraft, must not fly from a moving vehicle, must not fly over people, must fly during daylight hours. There are asterisks after those because there have been modifications to those last two rules in the last year with specific caveats associated with those kinds of operations. Important point is that you must be familiar and intimately aware of all of these rules and the details associated with them. So our strategy, instead of buying a drone first, get pilots trained and certified. We needed to have people that understood what this was all about. What are the FAA rules and regulations? And with that understanding, develop the policies and procedures that are going to ensure that we go into this with our eyes open and aren't ignorant or naive about what we're trying to do. The first step was making sure that this was going to be a county-wide collaboration. County management really dictated that from the beginning. This was not going to be individual departments going off on their own, buying their own drones and embarking on their own initiative. It was going to be a county-wide collaboration. And I got involved really because of the mapping aspects of drone imagery. We needed to create some forms, but this is really all the part of the process of formalizing your procedures. So we need to have a formal mission request form. And this was to ensure that we had documentation of the individual missions as well as the approvals within the department, so they knew what was going on, that we knew that it was understood that we needed to have some kind of a return on investment. We weren't just going out there for fun. And then be able to track our missions. And this is part of the whole documentation process. And then we can start thinking about buying drones. We used remotepilot101.com. I'm not trying to sell their product. There are a number of others out there. The point here is that you can get training online, and it's not very expensive. It's $150 per pilot. You can get in-person training. Some of these organizations will allow for that. If you have a number of pilots that all need to be trained at the same time, it may be economical to do that. But we found Remote Pilot 101 to be really very practical. It does require about 40 hours of classroom training through the online training. And then you need to do some additional studying afterwards. And the nice thing about this particular service is that they have practice tests, and they actually get real questions that you'll find on the FAA certification test that they include in those practice tests. So it's a real good way to be familiar, and they have a very high rate of certifications from their training. And then you have to go to a certified testing center, and the test lasts 2 hours. We found that it really doesn't take full 2 hours to get it done, but it is in a certified testing environment. If you haven't been in any one of those before, you need to leave all of your personal items in a locker and go into a very quiet room in a cubicle and go through a computerized test. And it sounds intimidating, but we've been able to get pilots through it successfully. We have 16 trained pilots at this time. the kind of material that you need to know about. It has nothing to do with actually operating a drone, which is interesting. And for the most part, you're going through what a general aviation pilot has to go through in their ground training. You need to know everything that general aviation pilots need to know about the airspace, because you are in that airspace, operating in the same airspace that they are. So you need to be familiar with the aeronautical charts. And the nice thing is these are maps, and we're good at reading maps, right? So it's kind of a fun project, getting to know how to read these maps. And there's a lot of information on these maps, but the gist of it is understanding the airspace. And this is a diagram that you'd see a lot as you're going through the training. They call those upside down wedding cakes and things like that, but it's understanding what this airspace is and where you can fly. And you can see the little drone images on there that shows where you can fly. You can't go over 400 feet. And if you're in any of the controlled airspaces, you need air traffic authorization. Nice thing is there are applications out there to help you with that. This shows the Northern Dakota County area, which is in proximity to the airport, which means that even though we can't fly over 400 feet, we need authorization within these areas to be able to fly up to 400 feet. Or as you see in each of those squares, you can only get authorization up to that altitude. So 300 feet, 100 feet, 50 feet is the maximum that you would be able to fly with authorization. And you do need authorization to get that. The newer drones won't even take off within these areas without authorization. And the nice thing is there's an app for that. Before You Fly is an app that you get on your phone. When you're standing at a location ready to take off, you can actually request the permission to fly in that area. And we found that the response is very quick, and you can really do that almost in real time. And incidentally, the authorization has a limited time frame as well. You need to understand METARs. These are the meteorological aerodrome reports. And so being able to interpret this information is on the test. Even though there are websites that will translate this for you, there's a significant amount of time spent on understanding weather and how to read these METARs. And you do your work, go through the training, get your test, you get a card from the FAA. And then you must have this with you in order to be able to fly. And if you were asked, you would have to present this as a remote pilot in command on site. We created a website internally. Part of this effort was also to raise awareness of what we were doing and what kind of services we provide. This was a cross-functional work group that we created with multiple departments involved. You can see the list of the drone pilots. We have 6 certified pilots at this time and a couple additional pilots currently in training. But a variety of resources for the pilots, as well as being able to show all of our missions. So we have active missions and completed missions. The mission form has a description of exactly what it is that the customer is trying to achieve. These are all internal customers, by the way. We don't provide external services. But then making sure that we do get sign off by the department head so they know what's going on. And we will typically have a conversation with the requesting party, and if possible, actually have them on site when we're doing the captures so that we make sure that we're getting exactly what they want. We created a web app that shows all the imagery that we've collected. The points represent the location of the aircraft. The trapezoid represents the approximate footprint of the imagery. You can click on one of those, you get a thumbnail of the image, and then you can see the full image. That's using Esri's Oriented Image Catalog extensions for ArcGIS Pro. Encourage you to play around with that. It'll read an image folder and generate all of those points and trapezoids for you. The drones that we purchased, DJI Phantom 4 and a DJI Mavic Air 2, these are on the low end of the scale. Ben was talking about some more sophisticated drones. We didn't want to make a significant investment because there is certainly the potential to crash these things. And so our strategy was the DJI Mavic Air 2 runs about $1,500 for a full package, and the Phantom 4 about $2,500. We would consider the DJI Mavic Air our training drone. If we crash it and wreck it, it's not that much of a loss. Plus, it's easier to fly. It's more compact. The rotors actually fold up, so it makes a nice compact little package. And we found that it actually works very well. If we're just collecting pictures and video, it works very well. The DJI Phantom 4 is bigger, has better control in maybe less desirable conditions with wind and things like that. We've also subscribed to DroneSense. That's an online service. This allows us to track all of our missions. We enter our drones. It actually knows our drone by its serial number, connects to it, and can track all of the flights. You can see we've got a list of the number of flights and the number of flight hours. It does all this documentation for us, and that's important to have that kind of documentation. As a calendaring option, so we can keep track of the flight scheduling, and it actually keeps track of every flight in 3D. So all the flight tracks are there, and you can actually replay those in 3D. It's very nice to be able to go back and review a mission. So our general timeline from 2017 to 2019, we did our research and we used contract services for aerial photography. December 2019, we had initial meetings of interested department representatives. January 2020, we made recommendations to county management, and the rest of 2020, we really did more contract services and consulted with the county sheriff. It took that long for the county as an organization and the individual departments to digest this whole concept. And we had multiple conversations along the way about how to proceed, talk to risk management, talk to county attorney, make sure we had all our bases covered before we started. And in February of this year, developed the actual strategy, documented that, shared that with county management, and got 3 pilots trained and certified. And so that was really the starting point to proceed. We ordered the drones, took delivery on the drones, and started doing training flights in April. And in May, we did our first actual mission, and it's becoming more active as we go on. There are more interested departments now in both acquiring the imagery and getting pilots trained. We don't have a dedicated cadre of pilots. These are all essentially volunteers from various departments. The idea being that if a department shows a high demand in these kinds of services, they should consider getting their own pilot trained. The pilots that are trained, I was one of the first ones. It helped me craft some of the policies and procedures. But we have another GIS specialist as a trained pilot. We have a couple of survey techs as trained pilots. And that fits well within the organization because of the kinds of services that we provide to other departments already. It's somewhat related to all of that. But our communications department is interested in getting a trained pilot. They have a pilot in training right now. We expect that pilot to be certified in the near future. And most of the missions are really just capturing images and video. We haven't done any actual precision mapping projects yet. Back in the early stages when we were doing the county road projects, I think the intent was to get as much as we could from the drone imagery. And that's when we were doing the precision mapping, creating 3D point clouds and so on. And the reality was it's a huge amount of storage. The costs are rather high. And in the end, they really just referred back to the videos. The primary use for that imagery on county road projects was for documenting the area before, during, and after the project. There are occasions in a county road project where a private landowner will challenge what the county had done and what the county did to reconstruct their private property after the project. And by using the video from before the project, they're able to really very quickly determine if there were trees that were removed that didn't need to be removed or had not been replaced and things like that. So in the end, we really didn't need to spend all that money, although it was certainly worthwhile in terms of understanding the potential. At this point, for county projects, we're really just going out and capturing video. That has the most benefit, but we know the potential if necessary. And that's really continued. The primary purposes of the images and the videos is for public engagement, documentation, and internal analysis, really. So that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer questions. I know there were a few comments or questions that came up along the way. Oh.
One question had popped up, but I believe I answered it, asking about the red squares that were near Invergrove Heights on the map.
Yeah. That is South St. Paul Airport.
Yeah, we definitely cannot be flying our UASs anywhere near an airfield.
Right. And then there are other places you can't fly. You can't fly over any national parks.
Right.
Now we have talked to the National Park Service, and they will allow it under certain circumstances. You just need their permission.
And some of the area around us, people don't realize is national park because of sections of the Mississippi River in the city's area is part of the national park system. Sometimes you don't really realize that the areas that are off limits are off limits, and it makes it all the more important that people are checking the UAS maps on the FAA website and for getting LANCE approval.
Right. Yeah, I didn't mention LANCE. LANCE is essentially this screen right here. You use the before you fly, and you can get the approval from local air traffic control. At that point, it's not the actual FAA.
Randy, I just noticed something. I think actually he wasn't referring to that. I see 4 squares that are directly above the St. Paul Municipal Airport, but it's not over the airfield itself.
Oh, you're right.
It's residential.
That is interesting.
Now, I do know there are some areas in the area that drones are highly against the rules by local ordinances.
This looks like that there may be a problem with the registration on this overlay, because it is the South St. Paul Airport.
Right.
I'm not sure. Maybe there may be a problem with this graphic. Sorry about that.
That's highly possible. It is the federal.
Yeah, that should be the South St. Paul Airport.
A question concerning were there insurance issues?
County is self-insured. We talked to our risk manager about this, and it's not just the insurance issues. We actually had another meeting just recently. It's like, what do we do if we crash? What if we do if somebody gets hurt? And developing our own procedure for that. And it's really no different than if you're out operating a county vehicle or doing anything else with any kind of equipment on the county roads and things like that. So it is exactly the same as those other kinds of operations. So it's just a matter of reporting it. And incidentally, if you do crash and there is an injury, or if there is damage to property over $500, you need to report it to the FAA as well. So again, specific guidelines and rules that you have to follow. But no, we didn't have to get any special insurance. It's really covered under the county's policies of insurance, being a self-insured entity. But it was important to have that conversation, make sure that everybody understood what we were doing.
It was a question, part remark. Could that be approached to South St. Paul? Actually, I was thinking about it, and Eric, I think you might be correct. If you look at the aviation charts, which is maps, if you look at the maps for that the FAA puts out for the individual airfields, you probably are correct. It's probably the approach for the airfield.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not saying that definitely is, but that's very plausible.
Yeah. Point is still valid that there are restrictions and there are tools to help you with that. And before you fly is really what we actually use. There is an app that shows this as well.
Right.
Yeah, there's something wrong with that graphic there.
I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. Is there anything else you want to wrap up with?
No. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
FAA UAS data on a map. Wasn't sure if I was sharing my screen or sharing a, let me do this. All right, now you can see, this is an app. You can see it's an Esri web app builder app that the FAA put up that actually shows those same restrictions. And it's interesting, it's not showing restrictions over the South St. Paul Airport. What that may be is that South St. Paul Airport is essentially an uncontrolled airport and Class G airspace. So other rules apply.
I have to admit that when I did my 107 testing, the study up for it, I learned far more about aviation than I thought I would. I thought it was just going to be basic rules and regulations for making sure that you're not doing anything silly or against the rules with a drone. But no, you are going through a full knowledge test for an FAA licensed pilot, and
right.
The amount of study that was involved, it was not insurmountable, but it definitely, I learned a lot.
Yeah, and the most important point is that unless you are flying for recreational purposes as a hobbyist, you need to be certified. And even as a recreational pilot, if your drone is larger than 0.55 pounds, you need to register it with the FAA. A lot of people don't know that. I see people flying all the time. It's, they just don't know what they're doing. And commercial purposes includes government operations. I mean, and even if you're a hobbyist and you're flying for your brother-in-law who's a realtor, it's commercial purposes. There's commercial benefit. Even if you're flying as a recreational pilot and you have a YouTube channel out there, that's commercial benefit. So you got to be careful. And the fines can be substantial. So word of warning. Thank you, everybody. I'd be happy to follow up if you want to contact me individually. Feel free to contact me.
Thank you, Randy. All right. We're going to switch on over to Tyler now. Whenever you are ready, sir, we are ready for you to take over.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, and happy to follow up these great presentations. I think we are all covering some really good material, and some of us have some overlap here. So I'm glad to see we were talking about the FAA spaces and everything, and I'll be getting into some of that as well. Let's see here. Okay, please let me know. Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
All right. All right. So today I will be talking about UAS LiDAR mission planning and applications. And those of you who don't know me, my name is Tyler Kavish. I'm a geospatial project manager with AIRS. I'm located over in Wisconsin. However, I do have quite a bit of background in Minnesota. I got my graduate degree in GIS at the Twin Cities, and I also spent a couple of years at the Minnesota DNR doing remote sensing. So we can dive into this. Currently, I'm with AIRS, and AIRS is basically a team of over 300 innovative folks here. We have quite a bit of engineers and geospatial folks and architects, all sorts of different facets of infrastructure. I focus on the geospatial realm, but we do cross-discipline deliveries quite often, and UAS spills over into multiple disciplines. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But AIRS basically started our UAS projects back in 2015. Right when the Part 107s came out, we started applying for our licenses and training, and we had our first pilot our first FAA certified pilot in 2016. Currently, we have about 7 pilots on staff. That number changes from year to year as we get more people interested. But most recently, we've included a metric camera and a UAS LiDAR system into our fleet. The UAS LiDAR, we have it mounted on a BFD system, a quadcopter right now, and it's really optimized for both the simultaneous ortho and LiDAR collection. So we can colorize point clouds with the imagery. And the sensor that we've been using for the LiDAR is the Regal with a Planix IMU. And again, we compare that LiDAR with 1-inch imagery if needed, depending on the project. Here we have some of our UAS pilots and surveyors kind of setting up out in the field. As you can see, they are in COVID protocols out there. But as you approach any project for UAS, whether it's for LiDAR or for imagery, ortho imagery, you really want to have these basic set of rules in place, to go over before you even think about using UAS on that project. Where is the project? How large is this project? Is it going to be cost prohibitive if it's too large, for UAS? What features are you trying to get out of the data? And is there site access? Sometimes it may seem like a great idea to use UAS, but can you get there? Can you perform ground control on the site? And then, as we've seen in the previous presentation, what's the flying height allowed in the area by the FAA? How high do we need to go for the data requirements, and what is the ceiling allowed in that area? So some common misconceptions of UAS. UAS technology does not replace the need for boots on the ground survey to accompany that LiDAR data or the ortho imagery, right? We need to tie that data down to a place on the earth so that it's actually usable, that we can make meaningful measurements out of that data. So, so oftentimes people think UAS is very quick. We can deploy it very quick. We can process it quick, and we can turn around the data really quick. Well, there's still a lot of planning that goes into that. There's still survey control that needs to happen. And it's not just an easy button that we have sitting on our desk that says, oh, we got a UAS project, one click and shove the data out. The same principles behind standard large scale projects of processing ortho imagery and LiDAR, they still apply to these small scale UAS projects. So before we do any UAS project, when we get on site, we have a strict safety checklist and protocols that we follow. We have all of our pilots are trained up to do a site assessment, look for hazards. Are there power lines in the area? Are there towers? Are there guy wires? Is there vegetation? Is there line of sight? We need to have all of these things set up in place before we even get there, basically. So we have a successful mission. Some of the constraints for flying UAS missions, especially with a heavier payload for a LiDAR sensor, we really want to pay attention to the weather. You know, if there's any snow, rain, or heavy, gusty winds, that can be a pretty big problem. And for the LiDAR sensor, dense vegetation on the ground, such as tall grass, or crops on the site, can skew the DEM surface results. So you want to make sure that you're having tight conversations with people who are going to be boots on the ground, and that the site is ready and acceptable for a LiDAR mission. Most of the tree canopies are penetrable, especially if it's in a leaf-off environment, but we have flown corridor projects as well during the middle of summer that the canopies are still full leaf on. And then, as we talked about before, the airspace, the FAA regulations, the built up areas like the airports, those are going to have certain restrictions. And so we can go into this. This looks familiar. Somebody just brought this up. Here is a zoomed in image of Madison, Wisconsin. We see a bunch of zeros in the middle of the screen here. Here's a more zoomed in. But basically, right, the Dane County Regional Airport has a bunch of zeros in there and saying you get the flying height, the ceiling for UAS over this area is 0 feet. You're not going to be able to fly here. But just to the right or east or west of the airport, you start going up. 200 feet, 300 feet, 400 feet. That's typical of the case of sensitive areas. Assessing the size of the project and the project needs. Before you think UAS is going to solve all your needs on a project, you really want to go into it with the approach that what's the best solution for the project. So this is a landfill out in the Colorado Front Range, and we scoped it out for UAS. They wanted 20 pulse per meter LiDAR and 3-inch imagery. It's approximately just over 1 square mile. So it could be a good size for UAS. Anything bigger than this, 1 square mile, 1.5 square miles, it might be cost prohibitive. But even this site proved to be a little bit challenging just for UAS. Excuse me. So here we've planned it out. We planned out the flight plan for UAS LiDAR. And as you can see, there's just a ton of flight lines, right? There's 32 flight lines within this project area. We have 22 ground control points set to collect this data within here. And that's a lot. That's a lot of flight lines. There's a lot of ground control points. For this project, the county actually was going to be going out and collecting ground control to support the project. So 22 ground control points for the county to pick up, that was a lot of time. And so what we did then is we also scoped this project out for a fixed wing application. Not every project is suitable for UAS. And so here we have a fixed wing application, same deliverables, but it's only 3 flight lines. And then it's only 5 ground control points. So for this specific project need, we chose to go for a fixed wing solution instead of the UAS because of the inputs that are going in and the costs that are going into that ground control. So I just want to point it out, right, that not every site is fully suitable for UAS. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive into some projects that are suitable for UAS. So for the LiDAR, UAS LiDAR deliverables, most of the time what we're seeing with our sensor is that we can achieve basically a 2 centimeter vertical accuracy or better on the hard surfaces. So on the roadways or on the corridors or in open terrain, we're able to hit that 2 centimeter or better vertical. We can generate 1 foot contours. We can do feature extraction, planimetrics, curb and gutter out of there, or poles, structures, points of attachments. We can also collect the ortho imagery simultaneously, and we can colorize the point clouds with that ortho imagery. We can also collect videos, either at an oblique angle or a nadir straight down. Oftentimes those are for pre-construction or post-construction or restoration projects, so where they want to document what the site looked like before we started this project and what it's going to look like after. So let's just run through some of the projects, right? There's corridor mapping. We've looked at some of that already, the transmission. We do a lot of topographic mapping, as-built surveys, some vegetation encroachment along corridors. There's different quarries. We'll dive into some agriculture and water resource examples here too. So these images here, we're seeing a quarry on the top, and this is just the point cloud. This is the colorized point cloud. This was collected in, I believe, February or so. So we're actually seeing some light snow dusting on the ground within this quarry site. And then on the bottom here, we're seeing a corridor site for utility where we're taking some oblique video for that. I just saw a question come in here. Do we work with subcontractors to get fixed wing missions? Yes, we do. We have very solid relationships with many different subcontractors. So, and they're scattered about, throughout the country. And so we make sure to pick and choose the correct partner to go in on with a project, whether that be out in California or in Colorado or in Minnesota or Illinois. So here's a quick example of a topo mapping. Here's a landfill, and we were doing some cut and fill analysis on this site. Here's some more volumetrics that we can gather from the UAS data, so we can actually calculate how much volume is stored in these gravel piles on site on quarries. Here's another example of that. So within a quarry, we have, this is a profile view of this, this top mound here, this pile, stock pile. Then we can deliver the colorized and classified point cloud. We can do a surface model and contours of that, and then derive the volumetrics out of that site. This is another landfill. I believe this is Adams County in Wisconsin. But this is just a quick fly through or 360 of the project site. And again, we're mostly deriving surfaces, either in Civil 3D or ingestible into ArcGIS or anything like that. Here's just some more images of the ortho imagery and then the DEM associated with that site. And then here's some corridor mapping. So here we have a transmission and distribution site here. These are just the point clouds. And so here we've actually classified poles. So we have features classified in here, poles and points of attachment and lines. And again, these are very detailed screenshots here, and they look like images, but they're just very high dense point clouds. And again, so for corridor mapping, for UAS, you can kind of leapfrog and up to 20 miles. If it's a corridor, you can do these stretches in short bursts. They take more flights, more lifts, but you can still get the work done. Here we have a transportation example. We're just doing a fly through of the UAS data, and we can see as the data comes into view, we can see actually the scan lines of the data, falling over the road and into the ditch and into the side vegetated areas. On the road, we can actually see there's some above ground service features there. There's actually some cars and trucks that are on there. If you look hard enough, you can see some poles on the side. But this really gives you a good oblique view of the data coming in and how it's being collected, from the unit. So again, for this project, this roadway project, we're doing a design build for the corridor, and we were deriving 50 scale planimetric features and the colorized classified point cloud, so that meaningful measurements could be made off of this surface model, and design can be implemented. These are some of those derived products that were delivered to the client for that. So a very detailed tin or a surface for them. And then these are the planimetrics associated with that particular intersection. We've also done quite a few agricultural products. So some of the agricultural UAS sites that we've completed have been lemon groves or walnut groves, or even orange orchards. This particular site is the lemon grove out in California. This one was one of our highest pulse densities. So we did about 800 pulse per meter on this. And that's going to be with very careful flight planning. So there's going to be a lot of overlap. There's going to be, you're not just going to have one line going north and south. We're going to do crisscross patterns and gather as much data as we can to help the client really model what they're going after. And typically in these type of orchard products, they're looking for which trees produce the highest yield. Which trees what are we doing in certain areas of the field that are increasing our yield? So far we're seeing pretty good response from agricultural products for LiDAR. So again, these are all just LiDAR point clouds colorized with the ortho imagery collected. This is a quarry, another planimetrics. I think this slide is just off by one here, or a couple, but this is more planimetrics, cut and fill. This is also another larger quarry site that had very high relief. So I believe this was like 800 or 900 feet deep. So that we collected this quarry site, and it was an active quarry, derived some contours for it, and really produced some highly detailed site analysis for them to move forward. Okay, here we're back to the lemon orchard here. Sorry about the mix up of slides, but here this point cloud is colorized by elevation, but you can really see there, each individual tree out there on the orchard. And here's an oblique view of that. This is like the head compound house on there. So we have the utilities coming there, a large tree, and then the rows of the grove or the orchard. Here's that same image, just colorized by elevation with that point cloud. We've also done some transportation projects where there's been some really high relief. So this is an area out in LA County in California where there's some rock fall happening down on the side of this cliff with a road going through there. And as you can see here in this 3D view, that it's a pretty challenging environment. There was over 2,000 feet of relief on this. So we really had to plan out, where are we going to launch our UAS from? Is it going to be able to climb, fly this flight plan that we've planned without just crashing in the side of the hill? So there's a lot of technical pre-planning thought that goes in before you just run out there and collect the site. This one had quite a bit of challenges, and it required some ingenuity on site. Here's that same site with the above ground vegetation in there. And then here's some pictures of that site, from the ground control, and just getting an idea of, okay, this is a really challenging, steep terrain. And you're not going to be able to get boots on the ground out there to actually collect the data on that steep of a hillside. So here's just a quick fly through or it's 360 of that data. But again, we're driving CAD surfaces or in MicroStation or open roads, and bare earth DEM contours and that point cloud. Here's another example of a water resource UAS LiDAR project. This one, we were doing quite a few different things on here. We did some thermal, we did some LiDAR and some ortho imagery. They wanted a surface model of the area, and they had some lagoons on the site. They were trying to get some hydro brake lines around. This is another water resource project out in the Front Range of Colorado, where they are restoring this creek. As we fly through here, if we look down on the creek, you can see there's some very steep banks that have been eroded away within the river channel. And so this is basically a complete rebuild of the riparian area to prevent the erosion, continued erosion and deposition of this creek within a suburban environment. Now, this is an example of a dam failure that was in central Michigan, where we flew our LiDAR sensor. This was, we collected at about 500 pulse per meter. So again, very detailed mission planning, flight plans, a lot of overlap, making sure that we're getting all of the detail that we can for their rebuild of this dam site. And in the end, again, I said it in the beginning, it's not just like this big green easy button on our desk once we get the data in-house. There's a lot of manual editing that goes in on the back end once we get it in-house. And sometimes we need to review the data while the pilots are still on site. We need to send the data back over an FTP and get it in-house, view that data, and then we need to communicate with that pilot wherever they may be in California or Minnesota or Colorado and say, you know what, your third lift didn't look good. We need you to refly that. And so instead of having that pilot, drive or fly all the way back to the office, we need them to stay on site until we know that the data is good and that we can move forward and classify things correctly. So there's a lot of manual processes that still happen, whether this be a large scale countywide project or a small scale river corridor or utility corridor project. So just a quick overview, right? Proper planning into these UAS projects really produces the most successful UAS products. So, right, where is the project? How big or how small is your area of interest? What features are you trying to derive? And is there appropriate site access for all the project needs for the control, for the launching and the landing of that UAS system? So although UAS may seem very simple and quick and easy, there's a lot of thought and cautions that go into planning these type of projects. And with that, I know I ran through that very quick and we had a lot of examples in there, but I would be happy to take any questions. I see there's one in there right now. It says, when you talk about ground control points and GPS choice, specifically what happens if you don't use surveyors and just a sub-foot unit? Okay, we use surveyors for all of our control points. We have some UAS pilots that are not surveyors. And when we send those UAS pilots out, then we have a certified PLS go out either at the same time or just before or after and set control for those sites. Sometimes they may be base stations, depending on where they are in the country, and we may need to occupy those sites for a longer period of time, 4 hours or so. But if it's in more of a urban environment where the control networks are set up, we could get away with an RTK solution as well. But to say that we don't need surveyors, that's one of the common misconceptions. We want to be able, this data is so highly accurate. We're talking about 2 centimeter accuracy vertically. We need to tie that down, and in some cases we need to do a vertical accuracy assessment and show that the data is that accurate. And you're not going to be able to do that without proper survey, boots on the ground out in the field. Any other questions out there?
Yeah, I could chime in on that topic though too, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You're creating the precision products, and that's great. I've run into situations like with our sheriff's department. They'll go out and fly, and they just want an orthomosaic. And so the accuracy isn't as big an issue. They just they want all their images seen together, is the way they describe it. And so what I've found is that just using the GPS on the aircraft, we can ram it through drone to map, and the relative accuracy is pretty good as long as the imagery is collected in a regular pattern. I have taken imagery that was just a hodgepodge of independent images, and sometimes that'll work, sometimes it won't. And so there's an education process in helping them understand what they need to do in order to be able to get an orthomosaic. But it's pretty interesting to just take a collection of images, ram it through drone to map, and generate an orthomosaic. The relative accuracy is pretty good. The absolute accuracy is going to vary, and I've seen it from 5 to 10 feet, something like that. But then I have also been able to go in and just do a georeference in ArcGIS Pro or something like that, using known aerial photography. So, we've got 6-inch orthography countywide. We know the accuracy on that. I can just pick a few points and do a georeference on it, and that's good enough. It gives them what they want. I can generate a map for them. I can have it overlaid on top of other imagery so that, it feathers in and things like that. So it really depends on what you want in the end.
Yeah, exactly. It's the project need.
Exactly.
What exactly is the client needing, or the project, the organization, what are they needing, right? And if they're just needing a pretty picture for an ortho image or something, what you're saying may work for them. But as far as what we're seeing for LiDAR and trying to...
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, we're really trying to tie those points down and be as accurate as possible, and that's why we're able to see that higher accuracy, that 2 centimeters vertically.
Absolutely. I have also had occasion where we were able to send a survey crew out after the fact and just go get some photo identifiable points instead of targets. And
and we're very familiar with that method. Some photo identifiable targets will suffice quite often, as long as they're scattered throughout the site and they're representative of the project area.
In some ways, drone to map, Pix4D are pretty easy to use and are being used by people who have no background knowledge in geospatial technologies and associated accuracies. And it is easy enough to use that you can just ram it through. And that was really one of the things when I got involved in working with our sheriff's department, is helping them understand, what added value we can bring to the table for their projects. Because they're just out there doing stuff and listening to their drone vendors telling them that it's all easy. And so it's important that we engage with anybody that's using drones within our organizations and help them understand some of the intricacies and what we can bring to the table to add value.
I apologize for having to cut you guys off. We're getting really short on time, and we do have one question left up in the queue. Adam Deringer is asking, what was your most challenging project?
Yeah, thanks, Terry. We've had quite a few different projects, even just in the last year. But some of the most challenging projects are ones with really high relief and with typically active quarries. Tend to be some of the most difficult. I showed an example of one where it was about 800 or 900 feet deep. There was also a cell phone tower on the edge of that, it was a Doppler radar tower on the edge of that quarry. We had a lot of guy wires coming in and out of the project site. And so we actually had a controlled landing during that flight, and we needed to readjust our mission plans. Once the pilot got there on site, he said, "Oh boy, this flight plan is not going to work because, hey, we didn't see those guy wires in the Google Earth imagery, when we were planning out the flight missions." So it really takes skilled and knowledgeable pilots to be able to act quick on their feet when they're out there to to have a successful project. And in that particular one, we actually did end up having to go back and do some reflights of the project site and make sure that all the equipment was safe. There was some safety concerns on site with an active quarry, folks working in the site. So those tend to be some of the most challenging projects that we've worked on. But there's all sorts of different challenges out there, and these are just a few. But I really appreciate everybody's time. And if anybody does have any other questions or comments, or you just want to chat, I am sitting at a booth in the vendor area. Adam and I are both there for the rest of the day. We'd be happy to answer any other questions.
A wonderful lead-in for us saying goodbye, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us today. Tyler, Randy, Ben, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I have learned a lot myself, and I'm guessing our audience has probably learned a lot as well. So thank you for your time. And like Tyler mentioned, don't hesitate while you're eating your lunch to go to the Remo exhibit hall and check out our vendors. They're the wonderful individuals who are helping make all of this possible. So don't hesitate. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and officially end this session, but I'll hold it for just a second if anybody wants to say anything before logging out.
Thanks, everybody.